So the book I decided to read was Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. How exactly is Jane Eyre a Bildungsroman? A Bildungsroman is a coming-of-age book where the character develops. So Jane goes through periods of rebellion, independence, loneliness, uncertainty, acceptance, individuality, and they all combined make her mature, which is how she turns out in the end of the book. And along her journey, she meets mentors that teach her and shape her into the woman she turns into at the end. Jane's purpose is what she thinks she has to accomplish in life. And the first one is that she demands to learn about herself and her family's past because she has no known family and she wants to know who they are and why they kind of left her. The second one is because of Miss Reed, Jane wants to feel loved and included in a family or with someone else who actually wants her. She also wants to become successful because Jane was told by Miss Reed that her family was nothing in society and contributed to nothing and was very impoverished, so Jane wants to reverse that. The main characters include Jane Eyre, who goes through the maturity. And in the beginning, it's revealed that she's orphaned, so Miss Reed doesn't like her and she gets sent to Lowood boarding school. She studies there for about 10 years, and her last 2 years there, she becomes a teacher, which then prompts her to become a governess at another kind of manor place. And she falls in love with Mr. Rochester and has no known family. Mr. Rochester, or Edward Rochester, is the master at Thornfield. He's a rich upper-class man who's very respected, and so he travels a lot, and that kind of shows how desperate he is for love and a wife, because he travels for a wife, and he's very strict and disciplined and has a troubled past. He's also Jane's first relationship, and he kind of exposes her to the love kind of atmosphere. And other important characters are Mrs. Reed, who is Jane's aunt, Mr. Brocklehurst, who is the master at Lowood, Miss Fairfax, who is the head maid at Thornfield, Helen Burns, who is Jane's first friend at Lowood and first friend ever in her life. Sophie is Jane's first maid in the beginning of the book at Gateshead when she lived with the Reeds. Mr. Lloyd and Mr. Briggs were who she was introduced to at Thornfield, which tells Jane more about Edward and kind of about Jane's family. Diana and Mary Rivers are Jane's cousins who she meets at the end, which she really appreciates. And also included is St. John, who Diana and Mary live with. And Miss Temple is also included because at Lowood she was her teacher who really helped Jane. So in the beginning, Jane is an orphan who lives with her aunt and cousins, the Reeds. Jane was constantly subject to verbal abuse from Miss Reed, who put her down and scolded her for bad behavior, which Jane didn't really have, but Miss Reed accused her of. And all of this resulted in Jane becoming more independent, and she didn't feel as she had to rely on others as much. She just relied on herself. Once at Lowood, Jane develops, skills on education, common sense, and society. Jane still feels like an outcast because she doesn't make many friends and she doesn't really know what to do at school. But after years of schooling, Jane made 2 friends, and she evolved into a respectable young woman and became a governess after that, where she worked for Mr. Rochester. Mr. Rochester was a strange and mysterious man because he acted strange sometimes, and he had a troubled past, which made Jane curious. And when they do interact, Jane and Rochester develop feelings for each other, which is a very new feeling for Jane. And so she's very cautious. And when they're about to get married, Jane finds out that Mr. Rochester actually had a wife. And she feels lied to and then outcast again, which is what she feels throughout the book. And then she tells herself that she must leave because it's the best thing. Once again, Jane travels and goes on her own, and she doesn't get very far because no one wants to help her. And when she gets to a house, a man called Saint John, lets her in, and the two women that live there with him, she finds out that they're cousins, which is the Rivers, Diana and Mary Rivers, and they take her in, and she feels loved because she finally found a family, which is what she's been searching for. And in the very end, Jane has an incident where she thinks she hears Mr. Rochester's voice, so she gets in the mindset that she needs to go back to him. And in the end, that's where she ends up, because that's where she wanted to most be, because she felt most loved by Mr. Rochester. Rites of passage. So, incorporation, mentor-like figures help Jane get through the hardest times in her life, so she deeply appreciated those people and had so much thankfulness for them. Transition, Jane becomes more aware of society and where she stands, and she tried to climb the social ladder and become more prominent. Another incorporation was when Jane fell in love with Mr. Rochester and all these other things. She found a place where she felt like she belonged and she was appreciated. Separation, because Jane was an orphan and had no immediate family, so what she wanted the most was to find her family and belong with them, or find someone else where she belonged at. Thank you for watching.